Hi, my name is Carmen Ross, and today I'm going to talk about my artist book, which covers the topic of capacity. As you can see by my first page, I've decided to illustrate organs of the body that the capacity relates to and pull them out to have the description underneath. My first topic, which is memory development, discusses when children actually gain the capacity to understand that their past actions have future consequences. So as you can see in the left panel, there's a drawing of a child's drawing on the wall saying, "Mommy, look what I did." They're proud of their work, and as a 3-year-old, they have not yet gained the knowledge that past actions have consequences for the future. However, to the right, you can see the drawing has a table with paper that's been drawn on with the same saying, and at 4 years old, this is when children start to develop the capacity to understand that past actions have future consequences, and that's when you see some behavior changes, and if kids are acting out, they know what they're doing and why they're doing it, as opposed to being caught off guard because they're getting in trouble as a 3-year-old would for the most part. I personally experienced this more with putting stickers on furniture than drawing on the walls. I never was a kid that drew on the walls, but I do remember getting in trouble one time because I put stickers on furniture, and that was not what my parents wanted me to do, and I didn't understand that, and I didn't understand why I was getting in trouble for that. The next topic I covered was social identity. The research that I looked in mainly had to do with children with autism and how they developed throughout time. So the research found that children with autism tended to have higher rates of mental illness, especially depression and anxiety, when they grew up because they had less of a capacity for social interactions and communication, which made it harder to find that social identity that helped them with their mental health. And one thing that helped was finding a community, especially a community of other people with autism, to gain that social identity. This wasn't the only community that people with autism could form to gain some social identity, but this was the most beneficial according to this research. And while it didn't even out the mental health effects that people with autism felt due to their lessened capacity for social and communication skills, it did help almost even the playing field when it came to that. The next two topics that I'm going to be covering both have to do with speech. The first one is about late talking toddlers, so toddlers who start talking and communicating later than expected for them. Late talking toddlers, so a later capacity for speaking, showed later capacity for development of social skills. So a lot of toddlers who had been late talking ended up having a hard time making friends when they got into the school setting, which is interesting but not necessarily surprising because with later development of speech means that there are certain things that they can't develop until they get to that point. The next topic is on speech disorders, or another name for that would be a lessened capacity for speech past the toddler stage, past when they've learned how to talk. So this could include stutters or other types of speech disorders. However, the research showed this created a significant barrier between the people and the children with speech disorders and other people their age. So it made it harder for them to create relationships because they, first of all, felt less confidence in creating those relationships, and also they did not find a connection with people as well as other people without speech disorders did. I actually have some personal experience with speech disorders as my sister grew up with a lisp. So I noticed as an older sister that she had a harder time making friends and communicating with other people. But luckily, she went to speech therapy and learned how to talk through the lisp and became more confident in her abilities to make friends and is now way more able and way more willing to make friends and has a very active social life. The next topic I chose I assigned to the heart. That is because it's friendship, so this is a more of an abstract assignment than the speech ones were. I found through my research that friendship is a really important part of social development, maybe one of the most important things that children can do because this is where they learn all of their social rules through interactions with others. And not only do they learn their social development, their capacity for making friends and interacting in a social way has a positive impact on their grades and their social life and their overall happiness and mental health later in life. So developing friendships early in life is a very important stepping stool for later life development and happiness. The next topic I chose I assigned to the stomach, which is pickiness, and I also describe pickiness as a lessened capacity for eating within the cultural norms. As you can see in my illustration, there's a girl that's turning away from some broccoli, which in our culture is seen as a very healthy thing to eat. It's also typically a food that children are not willing to eat if they are picky about anything. Through my research, I learned that a lessened capacity for eating within cultural norms can also have an impact on healthy eating habits later on and also just overall physical health. So, one strategy that the research said for parents to lessen this impact is to let children help in preparing the food. And so, when they get exposed to that and they have multiple exposures to the same food, they become more comfortable with it. But forcing children to eat something that they're not comfortable with just makes them more stubborn and increases that stubbornness to keep them from eating that food and keep that capacity for eating within the cultural norms very low. The next topic I assigned to the leg, it's mobility constraints. So through my research, mobility constraints, which I also assigned as a lessened capacity for movement that's considered normal culturally for children to be able to run around and play, can actually isolate them from other children and make them less likely to have meaningful relationships with other children because they can't go out and make those relationships in normal playtime like other children can. In the research that I did, which was on a cohort of preschool children with cerebral palsy, a lot of them, when they had that community of other kids that moved in the same way as them or in similar ways, they did have meaningful relationships, but they didn't really have meaningful relationships outside of that because children who have quote unquote normal constraints tend to make their friends on the playground or in very active activities. Personally, I experienced this isolation when in kindergarten. I was no longer allowed to go out on the playground because I had gotten a burn from spilling hot soup in my lap. While it wasn't a technical mobility constraint, it did separate me from the other children during playtime and made me feel less connected to them and made my relationships with them feel less strong. The next topic, which I've assigned to the arm, is bullying or a capacity for violence that some children show, whether that be verbal or physical violence. While the bullies typically acted this way because they felt it was an expectation to do so and that it would bring them the social and familial praise that they desired, it actually isolated them from others because students reported feeling like bullying was something that they didn't accept, and as did parents and teachers. So while the bullies felt like this would bring them more social and familial gratification, they tended to be more isolated because of it. My final topic, which is chronic illness, I assigned to the whole body, as you can see, and there's also two aspects of chronic illness that I want to talk about in relation to capacity that affect childhood. So, chronic illness overall, I see as a lessened capacity to behave like a healthier child would be able to. And on the first side, you can see that that just a single diagnosis for chronic illness can cause increased social anxiety, which can also lessen a child's capacity for social interaction and social development as they feel less comfortable doing so. The research that I looked at also described that children with chronic illnesses tend to be more passive in friendships. So even if they don't want to play a game, if one of their other friends suggests a game, they will go along with it to be safe and keep that friendship. So chronic illness overall lessens children's social capacities and their social development, which makes them less able to develop in a confident way that will help them to thrive. So thank you for watching my artist book explanation. This has been Capacity.